But okay, all right. So second section we're going into is using Visual Studio while coding. This bit will be a bit quicker. It's generally just tips and tricks and shortcuts that you're going to use. So all of these are without using Visual Assist. Now, I highly recommend using Visual Assist as an extension. It makes C++ development, particularly Unreal development, a lot more user-friendly. And it's no particular fault of Visual Studio. It's just there's some things that just don't work particularly nice with Unreal CPP development, and Visual Assist does give you quite a bit of added functionality. I will be having a look at how some of the benefits we get from that a little later if we've got time, but for now we're not using it. Just so these are just plain vanilla Visual Studio shortcuts that I'm going to be going through. One thing before I go into any of these as well I want to mention is, remember, you can reassign any of these shortcuts. It's super flexible. You can rebind, you can have a look what is already bound, you can rebind stuff pretty easily, and if you go and rebind a new combination to something, it'll warn you if you're getting rid of other keybinds. So it's really nice and customizable. One of the things I tend to change, I used to change my back and forward from Ctrl-. I found that I need to take my kind of my hand more across the keyboard more than I'd like to for that. So I used to change it to like plus and minus on the numpad. Is different things that different people use, but yeah, it's nice to know that you can customize this stuff. Owen Codes, thanks for the follow as well. Very nice to have new people with us today. A pleasure. Right, so let's have a look then. So first off, we're just going to be looking at finding stuff. So there's no shame as a developer to know that most of the time you're kind of looking for examples of either, okay, I don't know how to do this, so let's go and find something similar and then I can kind of tweak it. Or you're looking for just a reminder. You're like, oh, I need to spawn an actor in my game. Oh, what's the syntax again? And you're not expected to remember everything, and that's why IDs have great tools to help you find this information. So let's go through the most common kind of finds that I use. We do have Card Game Manager. This is like a hefty. We don't recommend you code this way and make 2,000 line files. This game was made as a game jam, and then we've kind of extended it. So yeah, the code, this isn't a shining example of code, but regardless. So we're going to look at how you can find stuff. So if we do a Ctrl F, this is the kind of your basic find. So I use this, when it pops up this up in the top window. This is used for two things. One, if I'm looking for something in the document, and I want to be able to track where they are in the document. And two, the second thing would be if I want to do a find and replace within a document as well. It's really useful. So let's go and have a look at this. So let's say I want to find, is there turn in here? Okay, so turn comes up quite a lot. Yeah, a lot. And what you can see I'm doing here, sorry, I haven't explained this, is it highlights it on this bar I showed you earlier, but you can use F3. This is what I use this so often. You do a Ctrl F to find it. So let's say we're looking for a member variable. Let's have we got quite a big function somewhere in here? Well, it's not massive, but let's say in this function here, set current phase. If you select it, you can see Visual Studio will kind of highlight instances of it as well. But I kind of use it for that same purpose sometimes. If you just do Ctrl F on it, notice if I just click on something and then Ctrl F, it automatically will put what I've selected in there. I don't need to copy paste it in. Ctrl F will automatically chuck up what you've selected. So let's say I want to see how this parameter is used. I can just Ctrl F. I can say, okay, it's just used in this one place. Can I see it anywhere else in the code? I can press F3. And, oh, okay, it's not used in any other function, just these two. These are the two instances that we've got. So it's really handy using this F3 to just, it allows you to iterate through quickly. If you're looking for like many instances, I'd recommend using the other find that I'll show you in a moment. But yeah, I find it handy just to skip through, right, okay, let's see where anything happens to this player. We select it, F3. And if you go too far, you can always, it jumps down. So say we go out of this function and we notice that we'll skip over these, and then I've gone miles away now, so I might go, oh, where was I? I can press Shift F3 to go back and go back up to the code block where I was. So that's super handy, right? The other things that we can do with this is, well, I don't need to teach you how to use a find, I'm sure, but it is quite handy to do kind of whole word matching sometimes. The reason for that is if you're looking for, I had an example of this where I searched for rat earlier, because we have the enemies in our games are rats, right? Makes sense, cats and rats. So if we're looking for that, you see it's going to bring up all of this like duration stuff as well. So like a whole word can be really good for that, and then we can see that rat isn't in this file. So yeah, that I use that quite often if you're looking for a particular variable name or function name. One thing that comes in quite handy sometimes is even doing things like this, like you can search for the brackets after a word. So if we look for like player and then a bracket after, you can see we don't have a function that ends in that, but say I did party, but I want to look every time the function of it was called, you can see we got these parties using start with a bracket afterwards. You just need to be careful. Some people do their brackets with a space between them as well, so it's not always the most reliable way to find it. But that's a Ctrl F. Another great way to use it, in my opinion, is to rename things locally. So if you've got either a parameter or this enemy here, you can see that I've made it. So what is this? This is an enemy card, right? Character card we've called an enemy. So I could select that, Ctrl F on it. If I press this arrow here, it changes to find and replace. And say I want to change it to enemy card. Now this at the moment is going to be dangerous. It's going to go through all of these instances in the document and change it. So it can be a bit problematic like that, but you can go through one at a time, which is quite nice. So you just tick through and it'll go whichever one is selected. But what you can also do is just like select the range. So anytime the word enemy comes in here, then you can select all. It would still be wrong because it changes enemy dead counter. So you still might want to, if we change this to selection, like that, you can still change it. That you could still go through one at a time and it'll just loop over the selection now. So I want to change that first one. The second one, get enemy party. No, I don't want to change that. So I'm just going to skip over that one. And then it's a bit confusing because I've got that selected as well, but we'll just look at you'll see it iterate over these different ones in the moment. So I do want to change that one. That one. Oh, actually, so I'm going to Ctrl Z. I realized I actually was in the wrong bit. So we want to change this one here. We want to skip over this one. And then we want to change this one. And we want to change that one. We don't want to change that, so we skip, and we want to change this one. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why don't you use the rename function? I should, but I was just giving an example of how you might want to use the find and replace sometimes. It can be pretty handy. But if you want to rename, you can do something. You can right-click, you can go to rename, and you can say what particular one you want to change. And the nice thing about this, there's a great tool in Visual Assist that does this too. But if I wanted to change this to enemy card, you can then go preview and it'll show you all the times where it's going to change it, basically. So you can see that this is actually going to, you can tick on and off which bits you want to change. So enemy there, enemy, enemy, enemy. Yeah, that's good. And you can see it's not picking up just the word enemy. If it's in a function called get enemy party, it's not picking it up. It's cleverer than that, you know? So that's pretty handy. It even tries helping you, saying, hey, you might want to update this comment as well, which is nice, but they're not ticked by default. And I think that's pretty cool. Saying with comments here, comments by default aren't ticked, but it does show them to you. If you want to rename several different function names, you still need to do find and replace. Yeah. It's often useful after copy-paste programming as well. Yes. Yeah, because sometimes you copy-paste something in. Yeah, you got this exact body. You're like, right, okay, I've done this for the player. Now I want to do it for an enemy. Oh, look, I've actually done the exact thing. So I'd copy and paste this. And then I select it and I say, every time I find the word enemy in this, I want to rename it. I want to, every time I find the word player, I want to replace it with enemy. It's pretty useful in that sense. So that's your normal Ctrl F. The main thing I use it for, as I said, is if I'm trying to track something at work, I'll double click Ctrl F and then I'll just F3 to kind of track, okay, that's the only time that variable is used. It's nice and handy. The one thing that annoys me about this as a user sometimes is when, it's my own fault, is when I've forgotten to change this back to current document and I'm just looking in a selection instead. So if you select an area and we look in a selection and I'm like, oh, it's not in there. I swear it's in here somewhere. And then I'm like, oh, I've still got selection mode. Yeah, it can be a bit annoying. You'll notice it and you have this kind of little highlighted area. So it's quite obvious when it happens. But yeah, something to be aware of. But okay, that's the normal find, Ctrl F. Then we next have the kind of one of the most used tools they have, Ctrl Shift F. So this will do just a general find. And this is super useful for, I I want to remember how to spawn an actor in Unreal. The syntax, I could look at the documentation, or I could just have a look at spawn actor. Show me anything that has spawn actor in it. Now, top tips for this is, I can't remember if by default it's on entire solution, but entire solution will look in your engine files as well. This can be pretty bad depending on what you're looking at. So current project is quite useful, as it'll allow you to just look in your code files if it's a relatively common name that you're searching for. You can have the normal search things that you're looking for, and then you can go ahead and you can just go find all, and this will create a list for us. And in VS 2019, this search has been improved. Some of the things you can do for it, I think. Actually, I might be wrong on that. I know there's you can keep the results. I don't think that used to be there. That I really like, but it's in the debugging. There's some extra functionality in 2019 that wasn't there before. I'll talk about that a little later. Maybe you should change the color of your highlighted area. Oh, is that something that you you can probably do that in the options as well, is it? I've not tried that. Wonder if how it would come up and how they spell color. Color of text. So I guess it might be in that same drop down that we had out, like, is highlighted. Find results window. Yeah, these are the different windows. I don't know whether it would be in here, but if anyone finds it in the chat and they want to show the way that you do that, that'd be cool. But yeah, so we were looking at our find results. So I've searched for spawn actor. This will help me know then, okay, this is how you spawn an actor. You can click on any of these and it'll jump you to the file where it is, which is super handy. You can see that if I pin it, it will always stay open, which is that tends to be how I use my find. I'll just jump through different parts of it, go, oh, okay, all of these are without any spawn parameters. Sometimes you can pass a spawn parameter in when you spawn it. So maybe I'm looking for a different type of spawning here. Another thing you can do is you can find within the search. So Ctrl F in here. One, you can just highlight words. So maybe I'm looking for only stuff in I'm trying to, sometimes I do things like I'll do like a .h. So I only look through the .h files. Because we're spawning actor, you're not going to find that in a .h. But that can be useful if you're looking for a normal kind of like a variable name or something like that, so that you can tell which is the header and which is it being used. But yeah, generally that's one thing that you can do. You can actually search within here, and I think it properly filters it in here. So if we looked up for temp, yeah, now anything where it says temp, it will find it. So that's more of a filter that you can do in there, which is handy. So I missed some tips in the chat. So let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Owen Codes, hello, by the way. Thank you for saying hi. It's going great today. Thank you for asking. Let me just see. Uno Maestro telling us to use the hotkey Alt F4. That's only, well, I guess it's fun if you see a streamer fall for it, but I mean, it used to be fun in multiplayer games, right? You say Alt F4 for free money, and then you just see him disconnect from the game. But no, that's how you be a troll, Uno Maestro. You wouldn't want to be one of those, would you? There was a shortcut Brainoid mentioned earlier. Shift plus A during find and replace. Control H is useful. So Control H, it just skips immediately to this. But what's the shift? The Shift A, replace all. Oh, is that the shortcut for this? Is it? Or Alt A, it might be. But yeah, you did correct. Alt A, yeah, for sure, for sure. That's super handy when you know that you say you're renaming a class. Sometimes I'll copy and paste the class, and then I get the name of this, and then I'll just say, okay, I'm going to change this to be. I normally get rid of the A, so it changes the file and everything, and then I might call this like my super slot card, and then I'll find and replace, and that solves, like, that means I can pretty much use that card. It will change all of these kind of function definitions so that they'll work nicely, and it'll change even includes as well. It doesn't always work for everything, clearly, but yeah, it is definitely helpful there. Okay, so Shift Alt O is good if you're using Visual Assist. On its own, it doesn't do anything. What's this, Mr. Brainerd? Oh, so look, Brainerd has shown us how you can go ahead and change it. So if you go into fonts and colors, text editor, find scope highlight, you can change it to a new color. Let's do that. That sounds a great idea. So it was fonts and colors. And then it was in the text editor, I think it was. Was it code? Sometimes I wish it was alphabetic. I can't remember what you wrote. Text editor is text editor. Can you type text? No. Text visualizer. I bet other people can see it. Oh, it's the first one and we were scrolled down. How rude. Okay, and then you've gone to find scope highlight in here. Find scope highlight. There we go. Let's change this to be a brighter color so we don't make that mistake of accidentally having things highlighted. There we go. So if we do this and we do a find and we do just section, you can see that it's highlighted it like that. So I know that I was just looking in that section now. Lovely. I may question the color choice, but we'll go with it for now, right? Oh, can you? You can. Okay, so you can also, when you're looking for the options, so let's do fonts again. Let's go into there. You can do Ctrl F to find them. I think. Oh, can you? No, you can't. Oh, you can press F. Oh, F would take you down to one of them and then scan through them. Yeah, I guess you could do that. And it'll allow you to navigate through the ones that start with that letter, I guess. Yeah, so, okay, sweet. So we were looking at the Ctrl Shift F, which is our find all. Yeah, a very useful way is typically how I go and find snippets from other places in the code base. Or if I just want to remind myself how to do it, or I want to find every time that we've used, maybe I forgot how we've used like slot cards. So I'll just look for slot card, find all, and I'll go and look how they're used then. So this might be a case where, see, these are all CPU, loads of uses of the slot card in here. So I might, if I want, just filter it to be just the .h's instead. And then that could have some use. But generally speaking, yeah, it's however you need to use it. And then the final use of like a find functionality would be to do the find all references. So a lot of people say it's like I think it's Control Shift F12, but by default it's no longer bound to that to me. So let's just say we want to look at this owner deck. So we right click on it. Oh, actually no, before I do that, the find results I wanted to show was super handy, because you notice that the last search that I did for warrior or whatever earlier is no longer there, right? This tab is your find. If I want to keep this and do another search, you can click on keep results. Then next time you do Control F and I Control Shift F and I look for warrior, you can see I've now got a separate tab, and that's really handy for if you're constantly going back. I'm trying to think of an example when I've done this. I was changing a struct to have an extra member in it. And so I needed to go and change any time that used that struct. I needed to jump around and update the constructor to make sure it's passing in this new member variable. And so I would do a search in every time for that struct and where it was used. So I had a list of all different code files where it was used. And then I could come back to that throughout the day as I was updating different bits of the code base. So that can be useful for sure. But yeah, the next one I was going to show you then was this find all references, which is very useful. But again, it can be a little bit slow depending on what you're finding. But I'm trying to think of... It's probably better on some members, because the scope of them is a little bit larger. So we could maybe look at this slot card guide container. We want to see where this is used. So if you go in here and you can go to find all references. So find all references is kind of like a find window. You have a lot of the same results. I should notice as well, I should have noted, you can switch between the list view. You can do this on your other find results. And what that does is change it from this view where you see one line by line to like a structured view where it might come up in different sections. So that might be more useful in this where we've got tons of results. you can actually work out exactly where you want to actually find it. So this is it within our AI. Okay, we don't care about AI. It's where it's found in folders, and that can be useful, right? But if we go back into this this find all references, now what's different about this is, well, one of the things that I particularly like about find all references is that you get this over here, your read and writes. So this means you're accessing it to check the value of it versus you're setting it. So these are all reads at the moment. We can see that we're not actually setting it at any point. Let me just go and find, maybe we can, if we go into the header, so Ctrl KO, it swaps you over to the header file. Let's find a member in here that maybe the player party. So there we go. Let's go into here and let's go into find all references for player party. So it may take a little bit of time to build up, as I've said. Or is it only looking? Oh, also this might help if you want to just look in your current project instead. Again, as we said earlier, it'll help you be able to just search in the right areas for it. But there we go. So it's coming through and we can start to see these now building up. So we can see it's written to over here. Can you see the right? So if you've got a lot of things and you're trying to find, well, where are people changing the value of this variable? You can go ahead and you can filter this to say, okay, just show me only the times that it's written to, and it'll just show you the exact result. I find that super helpful at times when you're trying to see like what is assigning it, because really when you're debugging when something's going wrong, it's quite often when something is being written to unexpectedly, right? Or that you had overlooked perhaps. Oh, you can't see the right because let me resize the window and show that again. Thank you for pointing that out. So over here, you've got this list. Let me change this filter back to where it was. So you have this column with the read write and write. It shows all the different values by here, and you can just go ahead and filter them then here. So if you only want to see the ones where you've written to, you can just go ahead and you can tick the reads or the writes independently, or just see them all if you want to see them all. So yeah. So, Tangent Turner, good day to you. Sorry, it took a while to respond to your message. I've been using Visual Studio a lot a lot lately. Hang on, a lot myself at work. Didn't think it worked with UE4. Yeah, you definitely can. It's what I work in a studio, and I've worked with on a few games, and they all use Visual Studio. There are other options out there, obviously, but it can work. That's why I'm doing this stream, or one of the reasons that I'm doing this stream is it's not your default setup. You don't have to go and change a bunch, but to make it work nicer, there's a few little quirks and things that you can learn to help with it. But okay, so that was going through this example of the find all references. That's the one thing I find handy in there especially, is that you have the ability to go ahead and filter by reads or writes. So next, let's look at just general useful stuff when it comes to navigating. So as you know, if you're working in CPP, and you'll often be jumping between the header and the actual CPP file itself. So yeah, if you do Ctrl KO, it'll just switch you. It toggles between them. So quite often that's really useful. Another thing that I'm doing is I might want to, is I want to look at the declaration. And that's what F12 does for you. And this is kind of going to do the same. It's going to jump to the header file, but instead of just switching to the header file wherever the cursor was last there, it'll go to where this member is declared. So you can see I pressed F12, it jumped me back to this. I can press F12 again on it, doesn't take me back. It's not the same thing, right? This also works on classes. So it will work for a member, but if I want to know about this actual class, I can press F12, and that takes me to the class where it's defined. Excellent. So I can learn more about it there. So F12 is your general like look at button. I want to go deeper. I want to know more about where that came from. Where is that defined even, you know? In Visual Assist, I think it's the same as like your Alt G, you're digging deeper. You're welcome to ask questions about it. Yusuf, I will answer when I get a chance to. Okay, so that was the first thing about navigating. Ctrl K, Ctrl O. We also, not Ctrl P because that's going to print. Ctrl K, Ctrl O will swap you from one to the other. I also showed you that F12 will allow you to look at definitions. Super handy. I want to know what a support card is. Press F12 on it. Takes you to the support card class. The next thing after that is how to just go to a class by name. So Ctrl Shift T. That will allow you to search for just files. So if I know that there's probably an AI based, now at the moment we are also looking, it's interesting to be aware of like where you're looking, because this is looking in the engine stuff as well. So yeah, do be aware of that. But if you're looking for a specific thing that you've got named in your code base, so I'm trying to think about what have we got in here. We could just do our party. Oh wow, there happens to be a lot of parties, but this is just a general T. If I click the files, it should show me only the files. And you can see, there we go. We've got our party file, and you can just go ahead and jump to it quickly. So Control T will show you a general search. It can be good for functions as well. So if I want to look up something like get player party, I think I've got a function called that. There you go. It doesn't only show you files, but you can jump to the particular function that declares it as well. So if I go into this interface, you can see, there we go. And then that might work out why we've got quite a few functions of that same name, because it's an interface. Control plus comma is the same sort of thing. It brings it up, and if we type in true strike, which is one of the abilities we have in the game, that will go ahead and bring up things. So we've got an enum definition for it. We've got an actor, and then you can see the different places. We've got a function called true strike as well. So yeah, it's super handy. No, Brainoid, I cannot do that. Well, I don't. To answer your question, Musaf, I don't know exactly what you mean by stream setup. If you're, I mean, there's a. I can't even know. What's my command called? Specs. I think I've got that. But other than that, you'd need to be more specific with what you want to know. Hodsy, great to see you, by the way. My favorite Visual Studio feature. We're literally running through a ton, so I could not list you one right now. I've gone through quite a few that I like already, but yeah. So that control T is the same as Control and the comma. I prefer Control T because it's kind of a one-handable one, but Control Shift T will mean you're just searching for files. That's kind of how I move around code the most. This is one of the reasons I don't really use Solution Explorer, is because I tend to, if I know what I'm looking for, I will just search for it. And so that tends to be a lot easier. So if I just do Control Shift T and then I'm looking for enemy, then I can go ahead and, there's my enemy encounter. Great. And I've jumped to it. Now, there's actually quite an interesting one. Not many people use this. So you know how you have like Alt Tab when you're actually on Windows, right? You can actually do a Control Shift Tab, and you kind of have the same thing. It brings up a bunch of things that you've been on recently, and you can use the arrow keys and you can switch around them. So that's something that some people do. Control Shift Tab, and you don't have to press Enter on it. It's just when you release, it'll take you there. So that's super similar to like the Alt Tab functionality. If you like that sort of functionality, it might fit into your workflow pretty well. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of things that are helping you navigate at the moment. So I mentioned this earlier. These back and forward buttons, it keeps a history of where you've been. And when you're working in a huge file, this is a savior for me, genuinely. So Control minus will take you back. And it's not just like different files. It essentially, as far as I understand it, it makes like a little history point every time you leave scope. So that can be within a for loop or a function or a class. If you change what kind of local scope you're in, I think it records like a history point. So it's very specific, and you can press Control Shift minus to go forward. So if I was just to click here, and then here, and then here, if I press Control minus, you can see that was all within the same area, so it doesn't quite record that. but it can sometimes record even just a matter of clicks that you do. If you're working up here and then you go ahead and work in a different function. I'm not sure if it should do it here if I press Ctrl minus. Yeah, it takes me down to that bit, so I can kind of jump between where I was. So it's very, very handy. You can bind it to your mouse side buttons if you're used to going back and forward as well. Yeah, I tend to keep the Solution Explorer closed. I did just close it off. So if you do accidentally close it off fully, I normally pin it. I don't have it closed. You can easily just open it up again if you go View Solution Explorer. And then I'll just, you can either pin it out, but I tend to pin it in like that. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, now there is another thing you can do, which is super handy. I've got to try and remember. Yeah, so we have our Control minus to go backwards, Control Shift minus to go forward, but you can do Control Shift backspace. And that takes you to the last time you edited code. So if you're going around a bunch of different files, trying to find a reference, you're like, right, where was I writing my code? Because you're just looking at stuff, right? You're not changing it. You're like, oh, that's how they do this. Okay, great. Then you want to go back. Control Shift backspace takes you back to the last time you wrote code or changed code. That's a really handy one. Just like, honestly, I used to get so overwhelmed with like 20 tabs open trying to remember which one I was at. It used to stress me. And I really feel that I don't have that anymore now. I use a lot of these kind of tools. Okay, next up then, general tips and tricks. Yes, I have Uno and I just couldn't get used to it. So Uno is asking if I tried using the tabs on the left before. I have, but I generally felt that a lot of my navigation, I find I'm just looking through the list. There's a couple of things that I didn't like about it. Is they're ordered alphabetically. If I remember correctly, I tried changing it around because I like to order mine logically. I don't know if it allowed me to do that exact same kind of logic. You can pin stuff. You can pin them up here, but you can't rearrange them within the pin. Oh, great. Look what I've done now. I've moved it into its own little tab. Okay, so get back into that main window. So that's one of the reasons that I didn't use that setup. And the second reason would be that quite often you can just kind of get around in these different ways, or just typing in like that Control comma or Control T or Control Shift T specifically for files to jump to different files yourself. But yeah, I wanted to like it though because I thought it's better for vertical space, right? But it didn't work out for me. All right, let's go. Lots of little tips and tricks then, things that we can use as we're coding. So first one I've got is really lovely situational use, but when it does come to be one of those situations, it feels good, and that is the Control cursor. So Control cursor is not the right word for it, sorry. Essentially, you hold Control, you press Alt, and then it lets you have multiple cursors. So then you can write in two places at once. Now you think, what is the purpose of that? Well, it's really handy if you're trying to change the name of something. So you can do it for all of these. You can do whole words in the same way. So Control Alt, select these as well. You might want to Control Delete now to delete the whole word. And then you can rename whatever. You can do stuff like that. It's really handy. Or if you want to change all of these at once, you can even, I think you can just hold Control Alt and down. Is it Alt and down arrow? I'm pretty sure you could do it. Oh, you can do it with Shift. I know that. So you can click, if you hold Alt Shift and click down, it'll do all of them in a line like that. And I think there's a weird thing. You can even do like a cursor. Is it like a drag? Yeah, yeah, can you see? So it'll do it all at the end of that region there. So there's a lot of weird things you can do with this, but it comes really useful where, you know, you want to, maybe we want to click here, and then we want to also click here, and we're just going to change them all to BJ in our loop instead. It's definitely not something you use every single hour, but when it does come in handy, it really does save you some kind of brainless work, which is nice. So another thing is commenting. I don't recommend you comment out code and leave it in your code all the time, but if you want to try something out quickly, KC to comment it, KU to uncomment it. You can do single lines in the same way. Generally, that's how I would comment. So that's Control KC, Control KU. Swapping lines is super handy as well. Normally where I'd do this is say that I want to wrap this in an if. So what I mean is I can hold Alt and use the arrow keys to move this around, right? But say I want to wrap this in an if. I can go if, and then I might press tab so it can auto-completes it, and I might just say like is party members.num greater than 0 or something like that, right? And then if I want to move this into it, I just hold Alt up arrow and move it into it in that way, and then I don't have to touch the mouse. That's the sort of thing that I enjoy with it. You can also do it for big blocks of code. So if you're like, oh, actually, we needed to do this before that, you can just move the whole thing up as well. So it is really handy, that Alt and arrow key. The other thing on that topic of if we wanted to surround this, you can. Now, I found this out recently. It's super cool as well. If you do Ctrl KS, it allows you to do a surround with, and there's a bunch of different things that you may do, such as an if. And if you select that, it then surrounds the code that you had selected. So I should have selected it first. Ctrl KS, surround it with an if, please. And there we go. It's put it in there for you. And you can write whatever you were going to do before. So that might be a more efficient way to do it, but it is still something that I find myself using. The Alt and arrow keys I use very often. We have Brainoid Games in chat saying he uses Ctrl D. What's Ctrl D used for here? Ah, do you know what? I'm glad you said that. So duplicate, because Brainoid, I don't use that, but I should. Because how I duplicate, there's a shortcut, Ctrl X, for cutting, right? Cutting is good if you don't select something. It's like the normal Windows, like Ctrl C to copy, Ctrl X to cut, right? But if you don't select anything, it just does the whole line, which is quite handy when you're copying a line. If I just select this word, it would take the word as you'd expect. So if you want to just delete a bunch of stuff, you can just hold Ctrl X as a bit of a cheap shortcut way of doing that. But I often use it if I know that I want to do this exact line, but copy it again and just change a few things. I cut it and then I'll just paste it in twice. And then I could go ahead and maybe use my Control Alt cursors on all of these and then change it. Or, well, I'd probably just do the second ones actually rather than the first ones. Yeah, you can go and change the bottom ones in that way that I showed you before, where you can just change two things at once. So what Brainer just told us in chat is that we could use Control D to do that exact same thing. It just duplicates the line as well. Control L cuts the line in its own right. So regardless of if you've got anything selected, Control L takes the whole line. So if you'd rather not just click and then do Control X, to me, L's quite far across the keyboard, so I'd probably prefer, it depends if I'm on two hands on keyboard or not. But yeah, that's good to know as well. Thank you. Okay, we better get rid of this line before we break our game. All right, so that was one thing that we had. Now this next one is it can be useful if you've got horrible, massive. Oh, I realised my tabs are on the side and it's upsetting me. Let's say back to the top. There we go. There we go. I was like losing my comfort zone. I was looking for my tabs. I said, where is it? Where is it? Let's go into our mammoth file that we had, the Card Game Manager, right? So say you want to know what functions are in here. We did talk earlier that you can go into this kind of class view that we had. Where was it? Class view. You could find it that way. But something that's quite handy sometimes when you have these massive files is if you Control A to select all, you can do Control MM. And what that does is it will collapse everything for you. So that gives you a good way to, you can just kind of maybe quickly parse and find the bit that you want. You go, okay, that's what we're working on. You can do it on regions as well. So if I then want to undo it, Control MM is like a toggle. So it's one or the other. Control MM, it'll open it up fully. And then you can keep working on that. If I want to do the whole document out again, Control MM again, and it should. Did it expand it all? It didn't. Okay, there it is. I think the first time I did it, it was collapsing the one bit that was open, and then the second one reopened everything. That's all it was. So yeah, that's something that can be good if you have a massive file that you're trying to work through, and you want to find the functions. That can sometimes be useful as well. So you saw me do this a moment ago, but you can get snippets. So if you just type F and then you press tab, it'll auto complete it for you. It's a bit of, that's not a big old snippet, but if you do like 4, for example, it will put in all of this stuff for you. That can be quite useful. Some of them aren't really always relative for the way you do stuff in Unreal. You can also write your own snippets if you're ever interested in any of that, but that can be pretty handy. On the surround width, I want to mention this actually because it can become useful. So remember I did the Ctrl KS for surround width earlier. So one thing that you have in Unreal is like you can put in these ifs UE server. So this means like if it's a server build, then we want to do this bit of code. So we didn't have one set up for UE server, but we do have a hash defined for if. So if I do UE server code like this, I think it's just UE server like that. It then changes the end comment for it as well, which is really nice because in my coding standards at work, if you're using any of these, you need to also end comment it to make it readable when you're reading the bottom part of it. What you ending the if of. That is really handy. I've manually written this so often in work, and so when I found out about that, I was like, oh, blast! I wish I knew that a bit sooner. Okay, so yeah, that is our snippets. And the surround width that I've talked about. Now, something that's super handy as well is, copy and paste. So we want to copy that, we want to paste that. Everyone knows, Control C, Control V. But then this, they've added it into Windows recently as well. But if you do Control Shift V, magical, it shows you your history of copy and pastes. How often have we copy and pasted something and then we go somewhere and we end up having to copy something else? Maybe we were doing a search or something like that. And then we come back, we're like, oh, we've overridden it. Yeah, that's where Control Shift V can be really handy. You get history of things that you've pasted just in Unreal as well. So it won't show anything that you've been copying and pasting outside, not Unreal, sorry, just in Visual Studio. So that's really handy as well. The next thing that we've got in here, the rename. I showed you the rename earlier. If you ever want to rename a member, just make sure it's easy to use the rename tool. Control R will do it for you. It makes sure that it'll look for other instances of it and make it an easier process for you. Now the context menu, if you find yourself using the right click menu, there is a context menu you can bring up with code. If you do Alt and it's kind of like the back tick, I think it is on the UK keyboard, it's under the @ symbol. Then that I'll write it just in case anyone's wondering what I mean. That, a single one of those. Yeah, you can do that. And that will bring up the context menu. So if you don't like reaching for the mouse, you can do that and it'll bring up and you can arrow through and do what you need to do there. So that can be pretty handy. Big Trolowski, prop tab. What do you mean by the prop? Is that if you write a property? Does that do the getter setter sort of thing for you, or? And then the final thing, I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but if you want to get like a full screen mode to focus, you can do Shift, Alt, Enter, and you go into this nice full screen mode where it gets rid of the toolbar buttons. You keep the menu at the top, but it gets rid of your Windows bar as well. And yeah, it's good if you know that you've just got to cut some code and you're going to be busy for a while. I've got fireworks outside on the 26th of September. Who knows? Who knows why? Ah, okay, nice. Yeah, I have done that before. I guess in when I'm doing CPP, I'm not used to doing the prop. But do you have to write the word? Is it just for properties? Is that the keyword that it'll pick it up? I'm trying to. Yeah, if you, I can try and do it now. If you let me, if you give me an example of what to type. Una Master asking, did you show the member explorers already above the editor for the drop downs? I don't know what you mean, so you might need to be more specific. Yeah, well, I've tried that. So I just wrote the word prop and then tab. It just does that for me. It may be a language thing. Ah, so the list of methods. Oh, as in this thing, yeah. No, I haven't. I'm very used to using the changes when you use Visual Assist. It changes these bars. So yeah, apologies. I did not mention those, and they are really useful. So let me just go back into this. So in this list, you can get a list of all of the different functions that are part of this class. You know, earlier I showed the control, like Control A and then MM to minimize everything. Realistically, this is the way that you should be looking for functions. It's just scrolling through there. You also can have a look at, I think this works on it's in the headers that you get much out of this. I don't really use the middle one. Let me just jump into the header. Does this give you a list of all the members in here? Or is it just all of the types that are used? Yeah, I've not actually used that middle one. And then you have a chance to change what like solution you're in, I guess, on this side. But this far right one is the one that I would use. There's a nice shortcut in Visual Assist that I'll use. And as I said, if I have time to go through Visual Assist stuff, I will show you that later. Yeah, okay, so that is all of our general use tips and tricks of trying to use or using Visual Studio to kind of write code and just practical stuff when you're doing your general dev.